History of Hinsdale Rodeos by Dick Eaton, the Bear. Hinsdale Rodeo. I went to the Hinsdale Rodeo for the first time in a number of years since I've been crippled up and walk with a walker and cannot climb up the bleachers to sit down. Eunice Matfelt had called and said Jim had backed his pickup up to the north side of the arena and had chairs in it so I could sit down. When Mary Jo and I drove down to the arena and saw the crowd, I almost turned and went home. I did not think I could get near enough to walk to the pickup. We got to the north side and David Reinhardt led us to where Jim's pickup was, and I managed to get into the pickup. Mary Jo went back and parked our car where we could get out when we were ready to leave. Mary Jo went over to the hamburger stand and got me a burger and drink. We were in business. It wasn't exactly the best rodeo weather as the wind was high and the dust was bad. On the north side, we could not tell if there was an announcer or not. The wind just carried all sound away. The judges were very good. The two rough stock judges I did not know, but Dick Marshall has been to enough rodeos to do it in the dark. But where were the bronc riders? They must have forgotten to come. More money up would help that and do some advertising. When I was involved, I used to take a trip to Helena by way of Malta, Bohemian Corners, Lewistown, and every little wide spot along the way. White Sulphur Springs and Lewistown were on my list of stops on the way to Helena. Then returning home, I traveled to Great Falls, Havre, and Chinook. I went into every bar and store where I would leave a couple of handbills and maybe bought a drink or two for the house if there weren't too many in the bar for me to afford it. I used to work the reservations. Rocky Boy, Harlem, and Browning. Believe me, the reservations are loaded with good, rough stock and cowboys who know how to start a bronc and how to spur him. I used to try to take in that little Browning rodeo and believe they were loaded with kids as young as 13 years old who knew what to do with a saddle bronc. I used to even have somebody taking entries for me up there and collecting the entry money. Rough stock cowboys don't just happen to come. They need a little coaxing, and whatever happened to bulldogging? There are enough good cowboys on the reservation at Harlem and Rocky Boy to furnish all the cowboys for rodeo all by themselves. These kids around here who are just starting out have a rookie section for them. Well, let's face it, the show ran pretty slow. It was awfully long between events and between horses and bulls. The bronc riders should be up over their stock when their name is called, ready to get down on them. You can turn out their horses without them, and you only have to do it once, and they'll be there next time. I don't know how many people said to me, I'm not coming again, and have to watch hour after hour of team roping, run 8 or 10 team, the rest of them in the slack the next day. Let's face it, the crowd comes to see the cowboys bleed. The more they bleed, the better the show. If some cowboy gets knocked around or a bull tears the clothes off a cowboy, they say, look at that dirty underwear he's wearing. They paid their money and they say whatever they feel like. If a cowboy gets killed, they brag about the rodeo for a year afterward. The committee should be congratulated on the arena. That steel fence makes it one of the best around, and the chutes and announcer stand are as good or better than any place around. More seating needs to be built. About 60 years ago, I went to the Wolf Point show, and they had such a wind as we had July 3rd, only harder and more dust. They just kept going, and one could hardly see the contestants. Bob Askins, known as the daddy of them all, was there. So was Paddy Ryan. I think it was Askins who was down on his saddle bronc, and the gate man said, "Are you ready?" Askins yelled, "Give me to him, I can't ride him in here." Some of the horses I remember were Crappie, Hell's Angel, Big Enough, The Crying Jew, and 5 Minutes to Midnight. We had some bedrolls with us and we camped out at the Missouri River Bridge. It was a 2-day show and we stayed for all 2 days. The first Hinsdale Rodeo I ever went to was in 1919. It was south of the railroad tracks and there was nothing there but a big sagebrush flat. The cowboys I remember were the Lund boys, Hilmer and Burdick, Curley and Arlie Seeley, and Payne and John Foley, a fellow by the name of Green, Long George Francis, Morris Denham, and Lute Schultz. I think Buckskin Mary was there, and another lady bronc rider named Marie, whose last name I can't dredge up right now. She was also a trick rider and was killed, I think, in Chicago when the horse she was using dragged her to death. I saw Long George Francis bulldog a steer off a horse with no bridle on. The next rodeo I went to was in 1925, still south of the railroad tracks on a sagebrush flat. They used the old shotgun chutes, which opened in front and fell away to the sides. Funny, but I can't seem to come up with many names from that show. The Lunds were there, Curly and Arlie Seeley. I think John Portine was riding bareback and Morris Denham. I don't seem to have a list of the 1925 contestants, but I was digging in my 40 years gatherings and found a list of contestants for 1919 and a program for 1925. The Tanner girls, Nellie and Bernice, were riding saddle broncs. Their dad, Bernie, was the announcer on horseback with a megaphone. I'm including in this write-up from a list of contestants of 1919 and a program from 1925. In 1922, the stock for the rodeo at Shelby during the celebration for the Dempsey-Gibson's fight were trailed to Shelby for the show. I have a picture of the outfit taken someplace up on the Highline, probably west of Havre. The horses of the bucking string had been running in the Larb Hill country south of Saco. Earl Corman told me several years before he died he had a camp on the Larb Creek country, and that the Kincaid boys, along with a number of other cowboys, gathered these broncs, roped every one of them, and tied up a front foot for a day on the trail, until they were trail broke, and then let them down and went on to Shelby. I have no idea how long it took them. It must have been a miserable trip, as it was June, and one of those miserable years when it was raining in Montana. I took a picture to Morris Denham, Beartrack Schultz, and Andy Payne to identify the cowboys. They identified Denham, Payne, Beartracks, Curly Seeley, Frank, and Johnny Kincaid. If I can find the picture, I'll have a copy made up with this writing. By the way, Jack Dempsey beat Tommy Gibson's in 15 rounds. I guess Dempsey's guarantee broke down the town of Shelby. I don't think Gibson got a nickel for his end. Oil had been struck on the Shelby area, and they thought they would come to the oil capital of the world. I have a picture of Curly Seeley making the winning ride on a funeral wagon. I had a picture of him on a funeral wagon and one of Bouncing Betty up in the Pioneer Museum in Glasgow. Back to the Hinsdale Rodeo. I think in 1941 or 42, I have no contestant list for that rodeo year either. I remember Enright Jackson hung up on a saddle bronc, and his boot finally came off, and he just got scratched up. A little was all. Then in 46 or 47, there was a rodeo south of the tracks produced by Carlo Portine and maybe Harvey Jones. Lloyd Jones was a kid then, and seems to me maybe he was riding barebacks then. Too bad there isn't a list for these later cowboys and these later Hinsdale shows. Later in the 40s, Frank Locke and Jones put on a couple of rodeos at the corner of the Hens Place a mile west of town. I don't remember just which years, but I helped sell tickets for them. The last one I think was July 4th in 1950. Remember that year so well because 49 and 50 was such a terrible winter with deep snow. There were 30 feet deep drifts in the breaks just south of the rodeo arena. It snowed on the 4th of July. It still snowed a little on the 4th, but disappeared by rodeo time on the 5th. I guess that was the end of the Hinsdale rodeos for quite some time. I think it was in 1976, the year of the bicentennial celebrating. Haydee Steen and Marge Newman came up and talked to me to see if the rodeo club would put on some kind of entertainment for the celebration. These ladies were Hinsdale Women's Club members and were planning something for the bicentennial celebration. I got a bunch of boys together and we decided to get a big team roping together. We borrowed all the steel panels we could and built a kind of roping area. We brought my calf roping chute to use and I think rented the Whitewater Club's cattle. I got a gal from the Whitewater Club for secretary. Our roping went off in good shape and we had a lot of good teams. I no longer remember who the winners were, probably one of them was Connie Cox. The next year in 77, I believe, my good friend Bud Gear, who was a rodeo stock contractor, came and said to me, "Let's try a rodeo in Hinsdale." Well, I was a little leery if we could draw enough crowd to pay for the stock, the pickup man, the bullfighter, and the judges. Well, we drew a pretty good gate and stayed financially solvent. We had a meeting to see how much interest there was. Everybody seems to think it was a go. Red Melby, Junior Craig, and I each threw in $100 apiece and went out and started begging money to build an arena. We figured if we collected $1,500, we could put an arena together, if we donated the work. I think back pens were steel corral panels again. We rented some Powder River bronc chutes, Whitewater or Phillips County, I don't remember which, and we were in business. The next year, I think it was, we called to Dennis Boucher and he took his truck and trailer and went to Wyoming and got us enough oil-filled pipe to build chutes, and he built them himself. The club got together and bought a Powder River bronc chute in honor of Donnie Christensen, who passed away. We built a return alley for the timed event cattle. I had been up to Seiko on a Labor Day celebration, and the school district auctioned off a truckload of 4x4s, and I bought them and donated them to the rodeo arena, and we built catch pens and back pens out of them. I invited the Tanner sisters, Bernice and Nellie, up to one show and introduced them to the crowd. They were lady bronc riders and were riding in rodeos in the early 20s and mid-20s. They are the ones who told me that Buckskin Mary and Marie Gibson began in the early Hinsdale rodeos. I took them down to Glasgow to the radio station to be interviewed on the air, and they told some yarns of early day Hinsdale shows. The best they spun, I guess, they thought was a little too raw, and they didn't run it. Well, the rodeo just took off, and ever since, except one year, rained out and the crowds kept coming. But as I say, let's face it, I heard plenty of griping about non-contestants. You Milk River Cowboys had better go NRA, or your rodeo is going to go downhill. Believe me in the crowd. If you go NRA, they handle your entries and guarantee any bad entry checks you get. Put up a bunch of handbills during the month before the show. How come the only results I saw in the Glasgow Courier were Jack Billingsley winning the calf roping and some kid events? Get on the Courier and the radio station about that. A week or two before the show, the Courier called my wife, Mary Jo, to see who to talk to about the Hinsdale Rodeo. You should be talking to them, not them calling somebody to find out about it. Okay, fellows. Years ago, the Milk River Cowboys gave me a life membership, so you're stuck listening to me beat my gums. Meet with Olpheim and get them to go a day ahead of you or the day after. Cowboys like that. So, fellows, for God's sake, go NRA and get Olpheim to go with you. I'll be there next year if I have to get Doc to hang my bed from the announcer's stand. Chris, you'd bring me a hamburger, wouldn't you? I wrote this from memory, and like I said, let's face it, she ain't what she used to be. The Bear.